Alright, I had some slight technical issues when I gave this talk, so I thought I'd record it again in case anyone who missed it is interested in seeing it. And we're talking about web scraping with Python. Alright, so first off, what is web scraping? Well, in the context we're using it here, it's using a program to retrieve information or data from websites. Quick note on that, some websites aren't very fond of this because it does allow you to get their content while bypassing ads. So if they're very dependent on ad revenue, it's kind of like using an ad block program. The difficulty level for this, you don't have to have taken 131A, our Python class here at City College, but you do need to know how to install Python modules, and run Python programs. Other than that, if you want to just copy the code that I'm presenting here and modify it, you don't really need a lot of knowledge, just the 110, 111A level. If you want to recreate more of this or do something more complex, then I'd say maybe the 110B, 111B level. However, you do need to be familiar with HTML tags and how they work. But anyways, on with the show. Now in Python, the way that I'm using here to do web scraping is with a module called BeautifulSoup. It makes it pretty easy to do. And just an overview of how it works is you have the web page, and here I'm using XKCD as an example, and it's able to turn the web page into a BeautifulSoup object that you can dig through and find the URL or strings of data that you're looking for, and then you can either use those directly or you can download the content. But it's important to note you do have to use the HTML tags, going back to requiring the HTML tag familiarity. So once I right click on the web page and I view the page source, you see all this HTML code here, and then here's kind of an example that I'm using. The first step is to find, looking through their code, I knew where the comic is, so I tell the program to find the div box, so it's this bit of code right here outlined by the red box that has the attributes ID, which is equal to comic. And so you can see here this div tag has the attribute ID, which is equal to comic. And then within that, I further drill down and I look for the tag image, and I look for the attribute src, and I put that value into this variable right here. So you can see here the image tag, it has src with this string right here, and this string gets put into that URL variable. And now I can use this variable with this string to download the image or print it to the screen or whatever you want. Something that you'll notice later, when you are first opening the web page, you may need headers. This was an issue that I ran into. A lot of times you can just have the request be just the website, but other times you need to add some extra info. So here I added these headers right here. Sometimes you need a lot of extra info, like this whole bunch of text right here, in which case it's easier to just put that into a variable and go headers is equal to your header variable. Now the hardest part of this really is finding the right HTML tags to get the content that you want. So I'm going to go through another example. Here we're going to look at, well, what if I want to get the top stories from CNN's web page? And that's this bit right here. So what I did is I looked at the page source, all the HTML code, and I hit Control F to find this text right here, top stories, and there were 3 occurrences of it on the page. The third one is the one that looked like it was the most accurate. So you can see kind of here in this mess, Palin, Obama missed this in Alaska. Here, Palin, Obama missed this in Alaska. And then down here further, there was also the NASA bit. So I copied this huge chunk of text around this and pasted it into Notepad++, and it was one single very long line of text. So I started hitting enter where it looks like it would make sense, creating new lines to make it more readable. And you start looking for some patterns here. So for example, you can see that every one of the articles is encased in this li tag. which is list item. So again, knowing how HTML tags works, that means there's a parent tag for this, either unordered list or ordered list. You could find that right here, unordered list. So when you create your program and you're looking through the BeautifulSoup object, remember here that you can look for specific attributes within that tag. Oops. You look for, okay, the unordered list that has the attributes class, and it's this long line of text, or data VR zone, this bit of text here. Now and then from there you can then create some loops to get the actual content that you want. Now that's one way to do it. Another way to set it up is you'll notice that all of these articles are encased in this article tag, so you can see if there's some commonality here, because these are also within article tags, and you might not want those for this purpose. The other one is you see that they're encased in these other div tags that have this attribute data analytics with the value of top stories, blah blah blah. And so you could search for it that way. There's many ways to do it, whichever works for you. Here's this example of output for this. Using the webcomic example, I created a program that looks for various webcomics and outputs the images into tkinter. Now the question was asked, what is tkinter? Tkinter is a graphical utility tool that comes with Python. So when you install Python, you should get tkinter as well. And that's nice because then you don't have to install another program. Now, tkinter is nice for labels, and menus, and text boxes, but it has the disadvantage here for this particular example that the scroll bars don't work really well with images. It ends up being this whole thing that requires a workaround. But it comes with Python, it's free, so it's there. Note, if you're using Windows, one way that you can create a program that you just double click and it runs is creating a batch file, and it just requires a single line of code as long as Python is in your path variable. And that goes back to, this does require knowing how to run Python programs on your system. If you're running a Mac or a Linux system, you can just run from the terminal Python and whatever your program is as well. Here's a quick look at the code, the first page of it. And just one thing I want to point out here is that if you do use tkinter, you do have to have the Python imaging library. Here's the import statement for BeautifulSoup, and here's the ones that allow you to open up web pages. The rest is basically boilerplate tkinter code. And then here we have where you're actually using BeautifulSoup to get the data. So these first two lines here are to open up the web page. This one here is to create the BeautifulSoup object based on that web page. And then here is again finding within the div box attributes ID is comic, and then getting the value of source into this variable right here. Now, if you remember, this string here, it does not have HTTP colon. So when you're actually using that variable, you do have to add that to the string in order to download it. And then it saves it onto your hard drive, and here I just created a file called xkcd on the hard drive. And then from there I use that file to create to show it in tkinter using the Python imaging library. And then there's more tkinter boilerplate code. So once you have this program, how can this be improved on, or where do we go from here? Well, the first thing is error handling. This program currently has no error handling. So if I'm running the program, say within Python's native IDE, IDLE, when it encounters a problem, it just stops. If I run it using that Windows batch file, it doesn't even run. It won't even load what it has. So it does need some error handling. Another issue is that as it stands, the code downloads the image each time, which wastes valuable seconds and is not always necessary. So maybe some way to check to see if the file is already on the hard drive. Can it check to see maybe file date if it's new, or if it has a different name, or maybe the file size? I don't know. Also, the code does need to be cleaned up a bit. I'm pretty certain that some of those import statements are redundant and not needed. And lastly, the CS131A is the Python as a web scripting language class here at City College, and it teaches you how to create web pages that use Python to do interesting things. So you can incorporate this web scraping idea with some of the concepts learned in that class and create, I don't know, let's say a web page that has a script that gets the latest headlines from CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera and displays them on the page along with links to the original stories. So that's an idea. For the full code, you could just rewind this video and look at those last two slides, or there's the GitHub page that I wrote on the dry erase board. And lastly, the BeautifulSoup web page, the link is right there. You can look at it for documentation, how to use BeautifulSoup, and download it.